Hey YouTube, Kevin Clear here with a knife video for you. And I want to do two things today. I want to compare two blades to one another that I think are really comparable. This is the Cold Steel Tuff Lite and this is the Spyderco Native Lightweight. There are a lot of similarities between these knives from size and weight to construction. Obviously the blade steel is significantly different, but I'm also going to pretend, this is the serrated version, but I'll try to make some comments that would apply to some of the variations on this knife. Anyway, I want to compare these knives, but I also want to talk about buying knives. If you are in Canada and you're interested in knives, you're in a unique and somewhat difficult situation, because what's going to happen is you're going to find great deals on eBay, you're going to find great deals on Amazon, and then you're going to try to go, hey, that's awesome, let's pick it up, and it's not going to ship to Canada, or the shipping is going to cost you, $30 or $25. One time, I think some of you know, when I ordered a Benchmade Barrage, it cost like $90 when it got to the door. I was really upset. Anyway, I wanted to make a couple little points about buying knives and buying them effectively and as cheaply as possible. The first one is have a list, and when you fight that initial impulse. Some knives you see, and I've had that happen to me, and I know you have too. You just love it more than anything. You have to have it. You're willing to pay almost anything for it. Try to fight that impulse if you can. You will end up overpaying. And I'm going to use this knife as an example. This is the Spyderco Native Lightweight. I wanted this knife and wanted it for some time, especially after We All Juggle Knives review of the serrated version. I really wanted the serrated version, and so here I am wanting it and looking for it. And this knife in Canada ranges from $95 to $125. That's completely insane, I know, to some of you watching who are outside of Canada, but I put it on my list and forgot about it. And then, I don't know, maybe 3 months later or so, I happened to be on Amazon, and there was an Amazon warehouse deal for this knife for $38. $38 Canadian, which is probably, I don't know, $27 or maybe a little more, but it's probably about 30 bucks American, which is a fantastic deal for a Spyderco Native. And so of course I picked it up right away. I knew it was on my list, and so I picked it up. And that's how I sort of develop my collection. That's how I buy knives. I have this long list and I have a certain budget, and every once in a while, lightning strikes and you find a great deal on a knife on your list. Now, that doesn't always happen, and so there's some other things that I would recommend. One, if you can find someone in the US who's willing to receive orders for you, and either you go down and pick them up once every 6 months, or they'll ship them up to you, whatever. That's a great thing, because sometimes, for example, the Micro Shockwave, when I picked it up, it was a great deal. It was like $19 or $20 American, which was an awesome price. But Knife Center, in order to ship it up to Canada, was going to cost $24. Well, that's stupid. You're paying more for shipping than the knife itself. So in that case, I had a friend. I sent him an email. I said, hey, can I ship you something? He said, sure. And I sent it to him for whatever the $4 normal price. Then that knife was a good deal, but the shipping would have totally ruined that had I not been able to ship it to a friend. So if you ever watch that, friend who receives knives for me, if you ever watch one of these, thank you very much. It makes it so that I can own some knives that I literally would never be able to own. And here's one more point. I don't know if some of you have watched my Zero Tolerance 0560 video. Great knife, I totally love it. That knife I paid about $175 for, and I went into, a few weeks later, I went into Cabela's in Canada, in Barrie, Ontario, and they had the exact same knife for $325. $325, that's highway robbery as far as I'm concerned. And so be aware that if you're interested in knives and you go into a store like that, they have to charge a premium because they've got a lot of overhead to pay for. I understand that, but even there, I think they go above and beyond. One last note about buying knives in Canada. Warriors and Wonders is a great website. There's a couple of things on my wish list that I just don't have the money for right now, but I will probably be buying from them because they do have about the best prices that I've been able to find in Canada, apart from Amazon. And sometimes you will get a great deal on Amazon. Okay, so that's my knife buying discussion. Let's get back to this comparison because that's what I really wanted to talk about. But I thought I didn't want to make a separate video about buying knives, and since the Native was one of those standout examples where my system really came together and worked out, I thought I'd share that with you. Now, because of that, these two knives cost me almost the same amount. That will not be the case for you. You're probably looking at about 75 bucks here, and you're looking at about 30 bucks here. That's one of the reasons I want to do this comparison, because if you're thinking about spending, you know, the $75 to $100 on this knife, but haven't considered this one, I think you should. On the other hand, if you think this is a great knife and maybe you own one and just love it, you may also really like the Native, and then you'll have something that's in a slightly higher end steel. It's going to hold an edge longer, but it's going to be, I think, a similar philosophy of use, to borrow Nut and Fancy's term. So let's zoom in a little bit and make this more about these knives and see if I can, there we go. Now my head is out of the picture mostly, and so I'll try to do this way. So let's start off with size and weight. You can see, I need to zoom out just a little so you can see. There you go. You can see that if I hold these side by side, the Native is a full inch longer. It's 7 inches and this is 6 inches. That translates into a difference in both handle and blade, although the handle is not much different. It's only 1/4 of an inch. The blade, on the other hand, is quite different. You have 2 1/4 inch or 2.5 inch blade here with 2 inches of cutting surface. You have a 3 inch blade here with 2 3/4 inches. So you've got a full 3/4 of an inch more cutting area on the Native than you do on the Tuff. And the blade design is of course very different, but I think it's similar purpose. So this Wharncliffe blade is razor sharp. It's a great cutter. It'll do almost any EDC task you need. This leaf shape or drop point blade is also very good. It is also a hollow grind in this example, and most Natives are. You can get a Native in a full flat grind, just FYI. Oh yeah, by the way, the weight on these is literally almost the same. This knife weighs in at 2.55 ounces and this one is 2.5 ounces. Now, holding them in your hand, 0.5 of an ounce is almost imperceptible. And certainly carrying in your pocket, it is totally imperceptible. For all intents and purposes, these knives are too light to even notice when you're carrying them in your pocket. And so they compare very favorably or very equally along those lines. Let's move down to blade and talk about that next. There are a couple things we need to notice. The difference in blade shape means that the point is slightly more acute on the Native than it is on the Tuff Lite. However, this blade, look at it, it is a very pointed knife, and that's because of the deep hollow grind. Okay, this knife, because the grind is moving up, as is typical of a drop point blade, you're getting into more steel material up here. Down here, since this blade is not curving up to meet the top of the blade, it's just a straight shot. The hollow grind means that by the time you get down here to this tip, there is very little steel, and you have a very fine point, finer even than the Native, which seems strange, but it's because this is a deep hollow grind combined with a Wharncliffe blade shape. Okay, blade steel is of course significantly different. This is Aus 8A. Now, there's a couple things that I need to say about this. Aus 8A, because it is a tough steel, it kind of needs to be a little malleable for this. The blade, the edge geometry on this means you have a very fine amount of steel down here, which increases slightly the possibility of a chip or a break. Now, the Aus 8 is not a chippy steel. It may bend a little more likely than chip, which is nice in this blade shape. It makes it a little tougher, and this holds an edge reasonably well. I've only sharpened it once or twice since I've owned it, and I've had it for quite a while now. You can look back and see when I posted that video and count about a month before that. Now, This is, of course, S30V, which means excellent, excellent edge retention. And this is a serrated edge, and that's, you know, because they're a little harder to sharpen, edge retention is maybe a little more important. Let's say this. If you're letting edge sharpening ability put you off, if that's the reason you don't like serrated edges, it's possible to sharpen. It just takes a little more time and patience. Okay, that's all it is. Just a matter of being a little more patient and taking your time. But of course, the S30V is going to hold its edge much better than AUS 8A. There's not really a good comparison between those two steels. So we kind of have to move off of that and, of course, give a major edge to the Native in that area of comparison. Okay, so edge retention is going to be much better in S30V than AUS 8A. Otherwise, though, blade performance is very good on both of these, and both are great slicers, great cutters, are going to do a good job for all of those EDC tasks. Okay, let's see, what do we want to talk about next? Oh yeah, deployment. This is one of the similarities that you're not going to find most of the time between a Spyderco and a Cold Steel, but notice that both of these have a thumb hole. The Spyder hole is slightly more comfortable, no question about that. So when we talk about deployment, the Spyderco deploys more easily and more comfortably. That's largely because of the triad lock. Okay, now talk about the triad lock versus a lock back. It's much stronger. So if you're doing the kinds of things where you're worried about lockup, then the edge has to go to the Tuff. It's a much stronger lock on this knife compared to this knife. Let's go on then past deployment. Otherwise, they're both lockbacks. They deploy in a similar way. You're probably not going to get to the point where you can flick them open very easily. At least I can't do that with either one of these knives. Let's see. Oh, ergonomics. Now, I mentioned this in the video about the Cold Steel Tuff Lite. Ergonomics on this knife are absolutely amazing. It just goes in your hand as if it was meant to be there. The handle is a little thick. These two deep finger choils, one half choil so that you're really choking up, allows you to get a great grip on that blade, and it is phenomenal. Okay, just unbelievable. When you hold this knife, you feel like it is a part of you. Now, the Spyderco Native takes its name from the fact that it was going to be designed around the human hand to be very comfortable and very ergonomic, and it is, but not as ergonomic as the Tuff Lite. There's no way. This choil is just a little bit too small for my fingers, and I don't have big hands, so probably that means it's too small for a lot of people's fingers. If you do choke down, it ends up pushing your hand off the back of the handle and makes this a 3-finger grip. So you're much more comfortable in this position, even though that choil is not perfect for that. Now the jimping is very functional on this knife, which is a good thing that the Tuff Lite doesn't have, but the Tuff Lite's choils are so deep that the jimping is really not needed. This is going to be an excellent cutter, but the handle is thinner in this dimension, which means there's sort of some places where it kind of pinches the fat of your hand in a different way. So when it comes to ergonomics, although the Spyderco Native is very good, it is not as good as the Cold Steel Tuff Lite. There's just no way. You feel the difference between the two of these is like night and day. There's no comparison really. Although both are fine, I mean, yeah, both are usable and they're not uncomfortable. There's no question the ergos on this are just amazing, while these are just good. Okay, overall, you have two knives that are definitely in the small EDC category, both very usable, both very comfortable. I wouldn't consider either one of these hard use knives. There's no steel liners in either one. I would give the strength to the Tuff Lite. I'd give the blade steel, of course, to the Native. Maybe a little bit more pride of ownership with the Native too, because it is a Spyderco and that's a pretty cool brand. Overall, these are going to be very similar in how they're going to perform in day-to-day cutting tasks, which begs the question do I really want to spend the $100 for the Native, or can I get by with the cheaper steel but better ergonomics of the Tuff Lite? Really, that decision is up to you. I think they're both cool blades, and I will say, I find myself carrying both of these knives an awful lot. There are a lot of things that I do that don't lend themselves to a full-size knife, which you all know is my preference. And on those occasions, I usually bring one of these two blades because both of them are very, very usable, very light, and so you don't feel like you're lacking in the knife department, but you can definitely get away with a much lighter option. So there you go. That's the comparison between the Cold Steel Tuff Lite and the Spyderco Native. Both really cool blades. I can't really tell you which one I like better, but hopefully from the things that I've said, you can decide which one you like better. We'll talk to you soon.